Yes, welcome. If you're back, we can get started.
I'm back, yes. What can you see? Can you see me?
Yeah, we can see you.
All right.
And hear you also.
Yeah.
Then I'll have to share my screen again. Hold on. Let me find where I was in the slides. Right. So we've been talking about usability before the break. We've been talking about universal design. And now the next step we're going to do is consider a bit, what does that mean, universal design? How can we take that into the realm of software? And then what does that actually mean for documents? And how do they play out when you design or when you have documents in a modern form? Try to share this. There you go.
Yes, we can see. Please go ahead.
Right. All right. So we were talking about the mystery meat of mobile navigation, and right. Okay. So universal design. Just the idea is to design one thing for everybody. So how do you do that? How would you go about doing that? Well, the general idea is, and what people do is, well, we design a core product that is usable for most people. And then we identify what's not working and what are the hurdles for people with special needs in particular. And then we add solutions for that, right? So in other words, I design the core product, and then I think about, oh, well, but if people can't go there with their mouse, then I need some way of getting there with the keyboard. How do I do this? And this idea. And thereby we extend the reach of our software. We have our core audience, and then we add the visually impaired, and then we add the deaf, and then we add, all this. Never works. It's a very bad approach. Never, ever do it like this. That is because one never gets to the final steps in many ways. You design the core product, and then normally what happens is you're being taken up by maintenance of that product. That just doesn't leave any time to add more solutions for other people, or for user groups with special needs. And a particular bad example often is that some of these solutions that you would like to add are no longer possible because the core product already prohibits them from the outset. So an example therefore is, for instance, it's the Phosphor.js library. That used to be the library that was in a system called Jupyter Lab. Jupyter Lab is a document-oriented computational environment which is on the web, works with Python, does a lot of, it's used a lot in data science and biomedical sciences, etc. What Phosphor.js was is a library that provided all the widgets. And we tried to make that accessible about 2 years ago at a hackathon I organized in the Lighthouse in San Francisco. And it turned out that this library was so badly designed and prematurely optimized that effectively what now happened is they've just chucked it out of Jupyter Lab and replaced it entirely, because simply there was no way of making it accessible because it was so badly designed from the outset. Meaning that learning from something like this is that instead of designing for a core group, you think about all possible users first that could benefit from the project. Particularly, try to find all the corner cases that you haven't thought about yet. And then you do a requirements analysis. What does my software need in order to supply all these customers, if you like, to supply all these users? And where do we need to make allowances for different needs? Where do we actually have to split things into particular user groups? And you try to do that as late as possible. So in many ways, you're trying to design from the outside in to get as much into the core as possible. which generally leads to a more flexible product. And there's some good examples out there. For instance, plugin architectures, of course, which kind of allow you to just extend as you see fit, because they're so flexible and in the core that you can just plug in any piece of knowledge that you need. So that leaves me just to say, well, just summarize, what are the do's and don'ts of universal design in software? Well, first of all, you have to design your data structures as general as possible. Use a clear separation of concerns, and I'll demonstrate what a separation of concern is more clearly later in the context of the web. And make use of all the tools that are available to you for having multi-tier designs, object-oriented paradigms, etc. And in particular, avoid anything to do with premature optimization, which might exclude down the line, downstream, if you like, a lot of people that might benefit from your product or from your document. Right. And the general mantra is always, special needs should never require a special system. You should never have to ask somebody, oh, well, just because, if you have that particular disability, I'm afraid you can't use this system. You have to learn that new system, which nobody else is using. That is just bad behavior. And it's being demonstrated in many ways that a lot of systems that have been starting out as specialist systems have become so much more mainstream these days. So think about something like voice output, which was originally designed in the 70s primarily to support blind programmers. Nowadays, everybody in many ways listens to audiobooks. Alexa or a Google Assistant or something is in the background. Siri tells you the latest facts. You have voice input now for your sat-nav and for other assistance systems, which originally voice input was particularly designed for people with motor impairments, for people like me who have severe RSI, who have problems typing and so on. Subtitles, think about subtitles. That used to be just for the deaf and hard of hearing community. It used to be something weird you would switch on your television and it only worked on certain programs. Nowadays, I mean, even my daughters watch Netflix with subtitles on, because for some reason people find it convenient. It's like having slides with a presentation. Yes, you can only listen to somebody, but if you have some slides to go along with it, you can come back into the presentation so much more easily when you haven't been paying attention for the last 5 minutes. I'm not suggesting anybody here would do that, but you know, this is the overall idea of slides. Other things I use a lot: dark modes, large font, screen magnification, high contrast modes, all these things which are primarily geared towards people with visual impairments or with cognitive impairments are very useful for everybody. Right. And as a consequence, usability used to be equated with accessibility. And in many ways, it is true. It's still the same, but that means that usability and accessibility should be as a property for everybody, right? And not just we shouldn't just think of it as an afterthought for people with special needs. And what does all this have to do with documents now? After all, the lecture is called Accessible Documents, not Universal Design in Software. Well, if you think about what documents are today, documents are effectively more software artifacts than anything else. They have interactive components often. They work on various form factors, if you like. They work on your desktop, they work on your tablet, and so on and so forth. And therefore, it's important to design them right and thereby to remove barriers that could possibly occur when you don't use them correctly. Now, here's my intermission slide. This is how far I wanted to be before the break. So clearly I haven't achieved that, but no worries. So we'll just go through the remainder of the content in a way that will start some of what I want to do today on Saturday, and that gives a slightly different. As I said, the syllabus isn't set in stone. Right, documents. Finally, we are at documents. What is it? What are usability of documents? What does that even mean? What's the function of documents? If you think about what are they there for? Well, obviously, documents are there for reading, but also for writing, right? I'll write my documents, I'll make notes, and ultimately for communicating. They're there to communicate ideas and knowledge and not so interesting things as well, gossip. And usability of documents just means, well, the design or the container in which a document is being presented shouldn't really get in the way of these three major functionalities. Shouldn't get in the way of you being able to read it, or you being able to write it, or thereby you being able to pass it to somebody else in order to communicate your ideas. Well, traditional documents obviously made that quite easy. I mean, usability of traditional documents is fairly straightforward, right? Just there's obviously, you would use certain types of documents in different circumstances. So for instance, if you look at books, well, if you travel, you might not take your hardcover. Your hardcover might be nicer in your library. You bring the paperback while you're on your train journey because it might get crushed. But reading both is pretty much the same task. You read books as either way they come. Right? Slightly different, say, if you talk about newspapers, reading a broadsheet, they don't really exist anymore, but that used to be an art, right? Having a big piece of newspaper, a broadsheet newspaper, how to fold it right, how to open it, how not to, scramble it all up before you get to the last page. Tabloids is a different matter. It's kind of a different design of a container, if you think. And the design of the content used to play is more important when you talk about knowledge differences. So for instance, you would design the content of a math book differently, obviously for primary school than for a university textbook. And I'm not meaning now the content as in, arithmetic versus group theory, but I mean more in terms of the way you would present it. The design of the presentation would be different for a first-year math book than, for instance, for a university textbook on abstract algebra. So in many ways, traditionally, usability is straightforward. Accessibility, less so. Because what you need are different formats for different needs. So for instance, large print for people with visual impairments, embossed braille, or audiobooks. And those are separate media in a way. You have a book in print, your audiobook is on a tape, or these days or on a CD maybe. Your embossed braille is an entirely different piece of hardware. So that's always difficult to create and more expensive. Now with electronic documents, I have a small timeline of electronic documents here. I'll skip that. That's not so exciting. With electronic documents, in particular today, that's different. The documents become more functional. In a way, what is easier now is documents are becoming rich applications, if you like, which means it's easier to use the same source in order to make it accessible, but it's harder to make it usable in general. What do I mean by this? Well, think about a book. So you've got a book which you can read, right? Now think about this transition to an electronic format. In an electronic format, originally you might think about it as a rigid electronic format which is built for print, say a PDF document. You've got pretty much the same effects, right? The book, if you can read it, if you can see what's on the page, you can also read the PDF document. Right? Now you liberate that PDF document and just use the content, put it somewhere on the web, for instance. All of a sudden, it becomes just the content is there, which you can access with whatever means you like. You don't have to have your Acrobat reader. You now can use your phone. You can use your your tablet, and you can use different browsers, and you can use whatever you like, and thereby the functionality is opened up. It's therefore easier to access with different devices. However, the general usability now depends on very much how you design your document underneath in order that it's usable on all these different platforms together. Right. So in general, the outcome is documents usability is harder. It's accessibility should become easier. It's unfortunately always true. Again, I'll go to Luke W's one of his tweets, which is always fun to follow him. Here's a couple of web documents, as you could see them on your mobile phone. For those of you who can't see it, it's effectively 5 or 6 different documents, and quite frankly, you can hardly see what the content of these documents is, because effectively they're overlaid with all the app functionality in terms of interactions, advertisements, different menu buttons that you can press. Google asks you to sign up on one of them. On the other one, you can download an app for free while you're trying to read something on India's import more from the US after solving differences. It's a news article, but what you really see are ads, menu buttons, subscription buttons, chime, but all these things. So in many ways, the documents become so cluttered and unusable because they are no longer static as in books or PDF documents. Right. Right. And why is that the case? Well, because now the documents are on the web. And the interesting thing is, what does that mean for the documents? Do we know what that means for the documents? My answer normally is no, we don't. Because we don't really know what the web is. Do we know what the web is? No. Why not? Well, if we compare it to when we started using movable types, which kind of, at least in Europe, was Gutenberg in the 15th century, it took about 100 years before any new medium or form really developed. Before that, nothing really happened. The movable type was there, but no new forms of communications were developed until the novel, for instance, was developed in the 17th century. On the other hand, what you had a lot was kind of things like illegal copying, cheap pamphlets, and a lot of material which caused social unrest and really started kicking off the Renaissance period. And in very many ways, we have a similar situation with the web now. The web is very young. It's about 30 years old. And we're still finding our way with it. New media pop up every day. We don't really know what we are using them for, but we can see some similarities to print. There's a lot of propaganda which can be spread through the web. There's a lot of things positive for change as well as negative for change can be done. And there's a lot of advertisement, obviously. That's what people use it for. And another thing which we don't really have that much with print is, unless things are being curated well, the web doesn't forget. Once on the web, forever on the web. And I've just by accident last night when I put together these slides, I came across a very old website of my very first website from the 90s on the web archive. There it is. It's horrible looking. It's got a black marbly background, some white foreground, which is barely legible. I still had hair in those days, which is the picture there, but it's from the mid-90s. And it is, it's something you hopefully wouldn't see anymore on the web these days. But it's interesting that just by accident, well, vanity Googling, we probably call it, I found that web page again. And that means once you have it out there once, it will never go away. So be careful what goes there and make sure that it's good content. Now, one thing we have to be aware of is also that the web, in terms of the technology, is different when it comes to how documents are being dealt with and how they're being presented. So in many ways, we have a throwback to what before what we had with books. Right? All of a sudden, we have books. If you think about books, magazines, newspapers, they are a horizontal medium. So you go from the left page to the right page, or maybe from the right to the left page if you say reading Arabic, but you go horizontally across. Right? Now the web is a throwback to the times when we had scrolls, where things would be added at the end, vertically. That's why we have the terms like scrolling and so on. And I'll just show you an example here. Here's a text. Here's a text in, I think it's 100% zoom. And it's just the usual lorem ipsum dummy text. And if you follow it, it starts, and I'll zoom in onto the text. It starts reflowing, and not to the right, but it starts reflowing downwards, right? So it changes its layout, something you can't really do with a printed book, but it changes its layout and it becomes vertically longer. And all of a sudden I have to scroll down in order to see the end. And to make that slightly more, oops, the slides are a bit large now. To make this slightly more obvious, is I've put together a couple of pictures on the same text. So we now have 3 different pictures of little kittens. People love kittens and people like pictures on the web. If you will never ever find anything else on the web, at least you will find videos and pictures of cats. And what I'll now do, I'll do the same effect here. I'll start zooming in, and what you will see, or what I will tell you what happens is, as well, we're at 100%, zoom factor 125, 133. What happens is that all of a sudden the images start shifting, and the rightmost kitties are falling under the others and start assembling themselves or placing themselves vertically. And obviously, if you zoom further, then the second set of kitties will fall down as well, and everything I've got now everything purely vertically aligned. And I can zoom in even further, and then eventually, because the pictures will not themselves change, of course, I now have to start scrolling left and right. So why is that the case? Well, because the web is a vertical medium, and that gives us obviously the freedom of using the web in a way which is previously not really possible. You don't have to scroll sideways anymore. All you have to do is scroll down. That's fantastic for your thumb action on your mobile phone. You scroll down, you scroll up, you scroll down. Panning left, right is a lot harder to do. And from that point of view, the web is huge progress, because all of a sudden you've got everything in a single hand, and you can reach everything by just the touch of a single thumb. So it becomes ubiquitous. It becomes very democratic. At least if you have a thumb, obviously that's important. But it also becomes very ephemeral in a way, because you flip through things and they're gone. And it allows you for all kinds of things like interactivity, which your normal book doesn't, which your PDF file doesn't, and it allows you for personalization, which again, your book, of course you can scribble in the margin, and you can put in some dog ears, but in general, personalization is not really what you get from traditional elements. And that is an important aspect that we have to keep in mind when we think about what it means to get documents, to create documents that are accessible, usable, and in particular work in all scenarios. So this universal design idea for document, because we have to always keep in mind that they are made for a new medium which is vertical. And they're made for a new medium which does its own arrangement of content. And that is something particular for traditional authors, very hard to get their head around. What that really means is that all you're allowed to do is provide content. and not style. Or in other words, you should let go of control where exactly your content is and leave this to whatever software or whatever website designer thinks might be a useful way how to structure your content. And I'll try to show that to you with kind of in practice. What that means is contrasting pagination to reflow. So what pagination means is that I design something, or that I translate something into a electronic document which has a page format, like a book, like your PDF file. And this here's a math document. The Rademacher conjecture, or the disproof of a conjecture. And this is, it looks like a PDF file. It has pages. It's nicely paginated. It's clearly generated from LaTeX at some point. As a matter of fact, I took it from the archive. But what this really is, this is a web document that was created with a system called PDF to HTML-EX. And what it does is it effectively regenerates the look and feel of a paginated document inside your browser. And so you can scroll through it vertically, of course, not horizontally, but vertically you've got one page on top or underneath each other. All right. Well, that's kind of the traditional way to do it. If you do the same thing, but use the reflow and effectively let go of control entirely, just provide the content, I've done that here as well, you can now see that the actual document becomes a lot more flexible and a lot more usable from that point of view. And so this is the same paper. It's being translated with a tool that we will learn about in this lecture as well. It's Tech for HT. And now I think I'm on 140% already in terms of zoom. I'll zoom in a bit further. And what you can see now is that the document starts reflowing, the paragraphs rearrange themselves, the words break over and flow into the next line, and it's still nice, it's still readable. All I still have to do is scroll up and down, no panning left, right, and I can do that even further and further and further up until I'm at the very maximum size of my zoom factor here. And now I have a very, very large script. And the math is still available and still readable. And now I might have to pan occasionally left, right, because the math doesn't split well across lines. But that's just one artifact that we will discuss at some point. Right. Right. So, and that's for standardized web. So this kind of reflow, what I've showed you, is for standard documents in many ways. But we can do so much more if we let go of control. And I'll show you a couple of other examples where reflow is really, really beautifully executed. And all these are just web documents. So the first one is from Jen Simon. And this is a poster for this is a poster template, and it's for those of you who can't see it, it's the actual content is not straight, not a single straight line, but it's diagonally arranged, so it looks like two intersecting cubes. And if we zoom on that, if we zoom into this, all of a sudden at some point, because now we change to, say, a form factor like a mobile phone, it becomes, instead of diagonally, it becomes all straight, and it's all vertically arranged now, and we get effectively vertically arranged text, and you can flip between the two different views, and the content is the same, and the control is done somewhere else. We get a similar one. This is a particular example I particularly like. That's a poster for a chess festival, which has a bunch of squares which contain the content, when is what, which contain January 26th to 8th, for instance, what's happening, the different dates. And there's a picture in the background, which is that of a trumpet player, a chess trumpet player. And if we zoom in onto this, you can first see that the squares that contain the content stay the same. The image in the background stays the same size. Then it becomes larger all of a sudden. And then all of a sudden, there's a point where the entire content is rearranged. The image in the background changes. There's a different title image in a way. And all the dates which were given previously in squares are now becoming a single rectangular, vertically aligned list. And again, the important thing about this here is the content is there. The content is usable in all forms that we want to look at it. Right. So in many ways, let me. I'm mindful of the time, so we should start wrapping up. The way we want to view the web is a superset medium, and the superset medium that gives us all the possibility that we had with print, but so much more. And the so much more, and what we particularly will concentrate on in this course, will be the so much additional value that we can get from the flexibility by making the content, the same source, accessible for users with any needs, without having to change the medium, if you like. We do not want to change the medium. We do not want to have to go from the printed book to that audio tape that then can be given to the people who can't see, and the Braille version has to be generated separately. We want to do all of this out of the same source, out of the same content. And what the web gives us for this is what I've previously mentioned about an hour ago, maybe, which was the separation of concerns. What is separation of concerns from a purely software engineering point of view? I think I've got the Wikipedia link here. Separation concern is simply that you have distinct sections in your software normally that address different concerns, different functionality and different uses. On the web, we have what is normally called the web trinity. We have HTML, we have CSS, and we have JavaScript. One is content, one holds the content. The other takes care of the styling. And the third one makes all of this interactive. Right? I mean, there's a couple of additional things which we'll get to in the next lecture. So the web trinity is actually a lot richer. You know, since most of you are expert in the fields already, you all know about ARIA and about how to get semantics and things. But for the time being, this web trinity in many ways is really what makes it happen, what allows us to separate the concerns about content, how it's being presented, and how it can be adapted for personal needs and special needs. And this is, I think, a good point where we'll stop today and we'll continue next. Is it Saturday, I think? Next Saturday.
Yeah.
Now,
Saturday
I said at the beginning, I want to have it more interactive. I admit I've been talking a lot now. I can feel how dried up I am. But by all means, please, if you have any questions right now.
Yeah, please. So I have one question, Volker, and then other. In the meantime, please raise your hands if anybody has any questions so we can have. So the example that you showed of this jazz poster.
Yes.
So you had this, all the boxes were actually coming together into a single box.
Yes.
So this would, so there is a very sort of structural change. The reflow part is fine, but this type of a change has to be programmed into the document.
Yes. So this is, yeah. So it's been a while since I've looked at this particular example, but I think this is exclusively done with CSS.
Okay.
So that's all very smart styling, and in many ways, yeah. But the important thing is the content doesn't change. So the only piece of content that changes there is the background image. So all of a sudden, the background image effectively adapts itself to become a background image as you would have it on your mobile phone when you use it there. But everything else, in many ways, is just done with styling.
Good. So, any questions, please?
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Sanchit.
Hello.
I really liked your present slides. So I was curious which things were used to make this presentation slide.
I think the question is, what was used to make the presentation slides?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, well, so the way I write slides is in Markdown. There's a library called Markdown IT, which allows you to translate those very, very simply into slides using JavaScript. And then I have a bit my own little styling and a couple of things which sort out things for me, like integrating images and so on. So the slides are always can be created locally as well as fully standalone. And I'm very happy to share all of that. I don't know, as a matter of fact, but I mean, all of these lectures, they are in a GitHub repository.
Okay.
I'll be happy to make that public.
Yeah, so I think we can put this in a separate repository and make that part public. So that should be.
So preparing slides will be definitely one of the lectures that I'm going to give. I'm not sure whether I'll dare to teach my own stuff here, but I'll teach some of the more generally well-known things that people can use in order to create particularly accessible slides for the web as well.
Any other questions? Okay, if there are no questions, we will. Please remember this Saturday we will have a class at 5 o'clock, because by IIT daily calendar, we declare some Saturdays are working days to compensate for some holidays like Good Friday, and this time we had Holi and Good Friday, 2 holidays in this week. So because of both these holidays, this Saturday is a working day. So please join us at 5 o'clock on Saturday as regular class days.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Volker, and we will see you again on Saturday.
Yeah,
and I will put the slides on the Teams so you can download them. And again, I did get one request, but if there's anybody else who did not get the Teams link, and they got the link through my email, not through the Teams, please let me know, because we need to fix it. Because otherwise you will not be getting any more links for the subsequent classes.
So here's my question, because I'm not aware of that either. Will the link change every week or every lecture?
We can do both, but we are changing it. So so essentially, because that gives a little flexibility. Otherwise, we have to put a schedule, and our schedule, unfortunately, is a little bit like it's not just weekly repeating. There are some holidays and so on and so forth. So I generate a link in the morning of every day and then just mail it to. So whatever the latest Teams mail you get, that will be there.
All right, then I'll looking forward to seeing everybody again on Saturday. And we'll dive into web accessibility in particular, and then look at the first documents, how to make them accessible, and yeah, and just text.
Thank you.
Next week.
We just finished in time, 6:31. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.